Start.
I think we can go ahead because I know there's a lot to cover. We'll be a small but mighty group
That's right.
for for this. Well, thank you all for joining in here. I just wanted to say welcome to the second webinar. This is a presentation on identifying new editions for reading lists. The first presentation was held on Tuesday, Australian time, with two of our colleagues, Jesse Donnelly and Kale Driscoll, presenting. So today, Jamin and I will be doing that same presentation with some additional information about our institutions. Next slide. So I'm Kirsten Clark. I'm the Director of Library Enterprise Systems at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and past coordinator of the ELUNA Leganto Working Group. I'll be providing some background on how this webinar came about, and then I'll turn it over to Jamin to introduce himself and demonstrate the report, as well as discuss the report creation process. And then we'll both give some information on where each of our institutions have been using this report and ideas for the future, as well as covering Jesse and Kale's institutions and the work that they have done. Please do add your questions into the chat as we're going through, and we'll answer those at the end, as well as any additional questions that come up then. But before jumping in, I do want to acknowledge that while Jim and I are presenting much of this content and getting from Jesse and Kale, this has been a joint effort to reflect both the work of the IGLU and ELUNA Leganto working groups. Next slide. So since the early days of Leganto, there's been discussions about how to deal with new editions of textbooks. And the fundamental question that many of us have had is how can we proactively identify, suggest, and replace new editions on Leganto lists? However, we all seem to have very different ideas on how that should look and how it should work. And this is further complicated by the many different ways we approach these types of workflows within each of our institutions, especially when it involves teams outside those directly working in Leganto and processing teams, such as acquisitions or staff liaison librarians. So in 2022, there was a NERS request that was submitted that tried to outline a solution based on two basic methods: edition replacement functionality in ALMA and edition replacement alerts in Leganto. So under direction from Ex Libris, this NERS request was split into two distinct requests. One was 8056 and option one, which was to create an alert for purchasing new editions and adding new editions to the reading list. So this was that edition replacement functionality in ALMA. And then 7747, which was the second option, to create an alert for purchasing new editions and adding the new edition to the reading list. So this was that edition replacement alert in Leganto. In the end, it was 7747 that was the best option, and that was actually the top voted request for 2022. So after a lot of discussion in Basecamp, it became clear, though, that there were limitations on what could be achieved. And there were also challenges with creating something that could work with a variety of processes across the Leganto community. So based on that feedback, they did put the suggest replacement feature, was eventually developed and rolled out in April of 2023. So while the work on that particular NERS request was very welcome, there was still a strong desire to find ways to improve and expand the functionality in the NERS process for 2023. And that's where NERS request 8417 took the work done by the previous enhancement request and suggested further enhancements, specifically around the automatic identification of new editions of titles already in reading lists. And I'm just going to do a quote from that particular NERS request. So for some titles on reading lists, a new edition is published every year or every few years. And it would be very useful to be able to identify when a new edition was added to an institution's catalog. For instance, could a mechanism that could use the analytics report or a set of reports to identify the presence of a new edition for titles already in a reading list and generate a DARA recommendation? That request, 8417, was the top requested item for 2023, with over 400 votes ahead of the next item in line. So very much the community wanted to move forward on that. However, during the calculation on complexity points with Ex Libris, this request fell outside the current scope, and this feedback was provided to the community through Leganto L, but I'll just quote specifically here: the scope of the Leganto NERS is limited to citations and reading lists handling. It does not include identifying new additions to the library's collections, which is the basic functionality required for this NERS. So due to that feedback, we did have to withdraw that 8417 from the ballot. Next slide. So this was obviously a setback in the stage of the NERS process, and this required some significant liaison and communication with the user community, and in particular, the person or the organization that put forward that request, since we did have to take it out before the second round of voting. But what became clearer from all of that is that there's multiple challenges when trying to develop an idea with this level of complexity. There's creating a comprehensive solution that would involve Leganto, Alma, analytics, and even possibly Rialto in the long term is a huge complexity, as well as each institution having a different vision for what they would like that functionality to do based on their own workflows and needs. Agreeing then to a shared set of definitions and outcomes is also difficult and confusing and time consuming when you think of the whole corpus of our community and how we all use Leganto. And that NERS maybe is not actually the right tool for dealing with an enhancement like this. So where does that leave us in the community, and what do we do next? And I'm going to turn it over to Jamin now to discuss that question.
Thank you, Kirsten. Just to introduce myself a little bit, I'm Jamin McGranahan. I'm the current coordinator of the Leganto Working Group for ELUNA, and I'm the Associate Director of Library Technology and Digital Services at Vanderbilt University. We have been on Alma, Primo VE, and Leganto since 2018, and I've been a part of the Leganto Working Group for over 4 years now. So let's get back to our presentation, and the question is what do we do next? We decided to concentrate on the analytics component of the enhancement and see what we could do ourselves. Jesse took the lead on this and started experimenting with different report options to see what could be done using SQL. After finding a Developers Network blog post by Jeff Sinclair about using the join function, Jesse came up with a new and innovative way of using analytics reports to identify potential new additions within your own holdings. And that is what we are going to demonstrate today. So let's just jump right into the report and show you how it looks. Now, to get the report, you have to go to the community area of Alma Analytics. The way the report is set up is to look at titles on lists for active courses. And after the demonstration, we will look at different filters used to determine which titles appear in the report. So let's go to the report. So as you all know, you go to Alma, then you go to Analytics, Access Analytics. And we'll go over here to Catalog. You notice I already have it up, but it's under Shared Folders, under Community, under Reports, Shared Reports, and Leganto folder. Currently, there's only one report in here. This is the one that was created by Jesse. So I'm going to go on and open it. Now, if you remember, whenever you open a shared report in analytics, it is based upon the data that's in your current catalog. So what you see on your report will be different from what I see on my report. It does take a little bit to run, so just be patient. And let's hear to hoping that nothing happens with the network while we're doing this. All right. So on this particular report, the first 5 columns here That contains information about the edition of the title on the list for an active course. The first 3 columns are related to the title metadata. So this is the publication year, the MMS ID, and the title. Then we have the academic department description of the course list that the title appears on, and exactly how many citations there are for this title on those lists. Now the 4 columns to the right, highlighted in green, are for the new edition of the title that's available in ALMA, but yet not on this list. It shows the publication year of the new edition, the MMS ID, and then what inventory you have for the title, whether it's a physical item or an ebook portfolio. And to use the report, all you have to do is copy the MMS ID of the current edition of the title and look in ALMA. So I'm going to do that. Go over here to citations. Have MMS ID selected and search. So see, this is the current title that is on our reading list. So if I go back to the report and I look at the new edition, I'm going to search our catalog for this MMS ID. And then I can compare the two. So if it looks like these are different editions, you can actually go to your citation and use the suggest replacement button. You can work with the instructor individually. It really depends on your workflow, however way you want to do it. In this particular case, this particular title is actually checked out to the instructor of this course because I looked it up earlier. It's like, oh, well, don't have to worry about that. So let's go back to our presentation. So before we look at how the report was created and the possibilities for you to modify it to suit your institution's needs, there are a couple of issues with the report that are worth pointing out that you may run into. First, you may see duplicate rows of the same title, and this could be for 2 reasons. Either there are multiple bib records for the new or current edition. For example, in the case where you have both a print and electronic for the new edition available. Or another reason is that the title appears on lists for different academic departments. The second issue with the report is that sometimes we see false positives. The suggested new edition is actually the same as the current edition, and this comes down to the fields from the bib record used in the report. In this case, the publication year comes from the begin publication date field in analytics, which is from the 008 field on the bib record. Sometimes different versions of the same title, such as print versus electronic, have different publication years on the bib record. Generally, we have found that they're within 1 year of each other. Another issue is if the older edition doesn't have a subtitle for the newer, but the newer edition does. Then it won't provide a recommendation because of the formula used to match the different editions, which you'll see later on. And if you can think of any solutions to these problems, we would love to hear them. So feel free to reach out to us. Now, this report was created based on the steps outlined in the blog posts of the Ex Libris Developer Network Tech blog, using join and analytics to combine data from 2 subject areas. This fantastic post steps you through what you need to do to create this type of report. Now, if you're interested in editing the join query for this report yourself, this blog post will help you understand how the query is constructed and the key tips to look out for when editing one. For the new editions report, we use the titles and course reserves subject areas. And we chose this method for creating a report because it was the only method we could get to work so that the current edition title data is presented alongside the new edition recommendation. Other methods you could try are reports using the is based on another analysis filter or using the union feature. But we found neither one of these could present all the data we wanted in one report. There are a couple of disadvantages to using a report created using this join query. The first of which is that you can't use prompts. And the second is anytime you want to modify the formula for putting in different columns or filters, it essentially creates a different report from scratch. So things like column colors are lost. So next we'll take a look at the details of the report. So the first thing we want to look at are the various columns that we included in the report. If you might remember, when we looked at the report, the first 5 columns I mentioned all focus on the current edition of the title on the reading list. So these fields all came from the course reserves subject area. The 4 columns that focus on the new edition of the title, which were green when we looked at the report, are from the titles subject area. And as you can see, the begin publication date was chosen as the publication year to compare the current edition to the new edition. This is pulled from the 008 field of the bib record. And we chose this field rather than the publication date field in analytics because it didn't require any extra formulas to tidy up the data. You'll often find punctuation or copyright symbols in the publication date field, whereas the begin publication date field does not. So now let's look at the various filters we're using in the course reserves subject area. To keep the report a little more manageable, the first filter added was for ensuring the course status was active. We then chose to filter out lists that were archived or deleted. The third filter was to only include citations that had the book material type on the bib record. These first 3 filters are where you could adapt them differently to suit your institution. For example, some institutions may run this report after they do their bulk of their rollovers. So you could change the report to remove the active course status filter and include lists where the status is rolled over. You might already be thinking of the filters you will require for this report. So please go ahead and add that to chat and we'll take a look and see what we can do. The last filter ensures that if you have 3 different editions of a title appearing on the list, then only show the most recent edition. This is required for another part of the formula later on. Now let's talk about the title subject area and the filters we're using there. The first 2 filters focus on ensuring the title is current and visible, so we don't want to include these deleted titles or those that are suppressed from discovery. The last filter is the same as the last filter on the previous slide and ensures that the new edition recommendation will only be for the most current recent edition. And now in the formula, you need to tell the report how to connect the 2 different subject areas. If you think of the report that uses the is based on another analysis filter, where you select the column you want to match on, it's similar to that. And we're going to match on the title, author, combined, and normalized field. It's not a perfect match, but it's the best to use as it strips out punctuation from the title field, but still provides a little accuracy through including author's name partially. And this is where the last course reserve and titles filter that I mentioned were the same come into play. Since we're only including the most recent edition from the citations, This filter ensures that there's no recommendation if the most recent addition in the repository is already on the list. And this is what the complete formula looks like. It may be hard to read on your screen, so we will be sharing this slide deck to you later on. But you can use this to compare to any edits or changes you want to make. It shows how the previous slides we discussed fit within the formula. So in analytics, all you would have to do is create a new report under any subject area, then go to the Advanced tab and paste all this data that you see here into the new analysis text box. I just want to give you a little word of caution. When you bring up the report in analytics and click on edit, you will see this error in the top left-hand corner where you normally would have the subject area. This is normal, to be expected, so don't freak out. Due to the way that analytics works and how we are combining two subject areas, it doesn't know what to display. So after you save this report to your own directory, you will want to work in the Advanced tab, and in particular, the SQL issued box. If there are other fields you'd like to see in the report, but do not know their SQL naming convention, just run a simple test report. Then go to the Advanced tab, and you will see the SQL query generated. Pull out the piece that you need and insert it into the query, and then rerun the report. Now we will talk about some real-life examples of how various institutions are using this report. We'll start with my institution, Vanderbilt University, then two international sites, Bond University and the University of Western Australia, and then we'll finish up with the University of Minnesota. So at Vanderbilt, we have been using Leganto since 2018, I mentioned that earlier, but we really didn't start loading all of our courses until 2020. Since then, about 20% of our courses have reading lists, and these reading lists are linked to from our course management system, which is Desire to Learn, D2L. Currently, we're still using LTI 1.1, but we will be moving to 1.3 by next month. The reading lists are generally created by instructors, then mediated by librarians. There are some instructors, however, that rely upon librarians to create their lists in Leganto based upon a spreadsheet or Word document they provide. But then librarians then process the lists, and then they check on availability. At Vanderbilt, we have modified the report for a purpose. And the first thing I did was to add the course code from the course reserve subject area. This is directly linked to our course management system, D2L. So it will help to easily locate courses and any direct links that may be in place. I've also removed the course status equals active filter, since many courses are reused. And we are all about trying to automate as much as possible. So if you created a simple PHP script that utilizes the Analytics API, which will automatically run the report and generate an email. This email will be sent to our LibReserves Microsoft team, and the appropriate library staff will reach out to the various instructors. Currently, this works well since we have such a small number in the report. But if it grows, we could move it to a web page and point the team there to check for new additions. But this is future development. Next, we'll talk about Bond University, and I'll turn it over to Kirsten.
Thanks, Jamin. So as mentioned earlier, our two additional presenters, Jesse and Kale, come from Australia. And so I'm going to read from their notes for these particular parts, and we do have contact information for everybody at the end of this presentation. So as I'm going through here, I probably can't answer direct questions here about their processes, but you can certainly, they are open to being contacted if you have additional questions. So at Bond University, they have 3 semesters each year, and over Those semesters have about 1,150 lists that are created mostly via the course loader integration profile, with a few rolled over manually. So these 1,150 lists are shared amongst 1,500 courses. Most have their own list, but there are a number that share the same list. So Bond uses Blackboard Ultra as the learning management system and has the LTI 1.3 integration configured. Every course in Blackboard has an LTI link to the reading list in Leganto with the option to create a citation, section, or reading list links in their course content. And some courses use permalinks to Leganto as well. When it comes to creating new lists or editing existing lists, librarians, instructors, and their technology-enhanced learning designers, and this is who practice or who share best practices and provide pedagogic support, can all contribute. However, the instructor can be entirely self-sufficient with their reading list, and library staff just do the necessary library processing. Within the library, the teams have specific roles to play in supporting reading lists and ensuring the required resources are available. Next slide. So when Bond first ran the report, they kept this course status is active filter. And this was really just a test to run to see what everyone thought of the report. Faculty librarians reviewed the relevant titles for their assigned academic departments and decided the best method to suggest the replacement, whether it was the suggest replacement feature in Leganto that Jamin showed. And Bond has this configured so that instructors approve the replacement suggestion, or by liaisoning with the faculty, with the instructors individually, or whether it was necessary, and whether it was even necessary or the right time to be suggesting a replacement. Feedback from the librarians indicated the report was useful to them, and they agreed the timing of running the report was better suited to when courses were newly rolled over for the upcoming semester. This would ensure that instructors have enough time, as much time as possible, to consider the suggested replacement. Since then, when they first did that initial review, Bond has now adjusted the formula in the report to replace the course status equal active filter with the list status equals rolled over. They do the bulk of their rollovers 3 times a year, about 7 weeks out from the upcoming semester. And so including this in the report into their rollover process made the most sense for them. So Jesse, who was working on and who created or started these initial conversations, also had several ideas for improvement. And I'm just gonna kind of talk through what she's indicated here. The first 3 ideas can already be found by searching the Leganto Idea Exchange for suggest replacement feature. So the first one she came across was currently when you use the suggest replacement feature on a book chapter or an extract citation, the page and chapter information is lost when the suggestion is approved. Even though the page range and chapter details may change with the new edition, she thinks that the data shouldn't be overwritten automatically. The second idea exchange is that Bond has a high demand collection in the libraries, and it's important that staff are alerted to any new items that need to be moved to this collection. They identify these items by specific tags used on citations and that the citation is ready for processing. Currently, when a replacement is approved, the citation status doesn't change, nor is there any alerts. So there's no way for staff to know that there's a new item to move or an older addition to, a new item to move or an older addition to remove from the high demand collection. And this idea addresses that issue scenario. The third one is Bond has received feedback from their faculty librarians that it would be great if the instructor sees the suggested replacement, that they can place a hold request on that item. This is particularly important if they haven't yet viewed the item and need to do so before they act on the replacement suggestion. Jesse expanded this idea to include ebooks, so providing the full text link along with the suggested replacement. And the fourth idea hasn't yet been submitted, but is that Bond found that replacement suggestions were prevented on citations that had copyright approval. But what if this course hasn't yet been started? It still may be appropriate and efficient method to use the update citations to the new edition. And as mentioned, Jessie has not submitted this one. It is quite complex, and she is imagining that institutions would have different needs. I would agree, as many of us do copyright in different ways. Next slide. So that's about bond. Another example comes from Kale at the University of Western Australia. UWA has steadily increased their academic engagement with Leganto over the past 5 years, with the number of process lists reaching a peak in the last 2 years. One important element of this increased usage was the creation of an integration between Leganto and the UWA unit outline system. It is mandatory for unit coordinators to complete a unit outline. And if they want to include an essential textbooks as part of their unit outline, they need to do so through Leganto. All courses are imported into Alma using an API, and the lists are rolled over for each teaching period so that most unit coordinators, the process is fairly simple if all they wish to do is include 1 or 2 essential items. Adding the essential tag to Leganto automatically exports that citation to the unit outline. This is the minimum engagement required, but it has successfully increased the visibility of Leganto as a teaching tool and created a much more consistent experience for students. Of course, there are also many unit coordinators that would like to curate long and complex reading lists in a variety of subject areas, but an average list is around 30 items and made up of ebooks, print books, scanned chapters, videos, and online articles, arranged into set readings for each week of the teaching period. UWA has a quite different situation than when it comes to textbooks and new editions. Academic staff are mainly responsible for identifying and selecting new editions for their teaching purposes. They are encouraged to review rolled over lists for each new teaching period, and they can indicate that the new item needs to be ordered by adding a citation to Leganto. Their unit reading teams then place a request purchase from the citation that goes to the order team for processing. So at this stage, UWA is really looking at this new report as an opportunity to review current workflows and identify ways to be more proactive about ensuring they have access to the latest resources. This will be a library-wide effort, including collaborations with unit readings, orders team, and the liaison librarians to work more directly with the academic staff. At UWA, the second semester only started this week, so they are very busy processing requests for Leganto right now. Once that flow slows down, they will take a time to look at the report and how they might apply it to their current context. The first step will most likely be looking at their semester 1 reading lists, and are there any textbooks that the library actually had newer editions available for that weren't on reading lists? And do they now have ebook access to resources that were previously only listed as print? Once they understand a bit more about the way the report works for their holdings, then UWA will look at how to use it as part of the standard preparation for each teaching period. The main thing to point out that Kale would want to point out here is that even if you don't feel like you know exactly how this report might work for you right now, don't worry. It will be a learning process for us all, as we are all at different stages in our Leganto journey, and we all have different needs and workflows. As we share our experiences with using and adapting this report, we can build the number of scenarios that can be applied to a wide range of situations. Which leads me into the University of Minnesota here at the Twin Cities. We have been using Leganto since 2019 in conjunction with Canvas, and each semester my department, Library Enterprise Systems, in conjunction with our course materials reserve staff, generate a base reading list for every course section combination, which can be between 10,000 and 18,000 reading lists each semester. So for fall, that's our busiest semester. We had approximately 18,000 reading lists that were rolled over, created, and with that base section or that one section with the 3 base links that highlight specific resources, that tie to the library's guides, services, and spaces. We have about another 1,600 lists that provide additional print and electronic resources, ebooks, PDFs, journal articles, web links based on instructor needs. Each semester, the library also works with the university bookstore to continually increase affordability for course materials by purchasing unlimited use ebooks for the textbooks that are part of the bookstore, if available, and that these are added to the reading list for the associated course. The majority of our lists are created through rollover or through requests to the library staff, but we also work with the Disability Resource Center to ensure accessibility resources for classes that students that have registered with the center. So this is, I know, hard to read, but after Jamin was showing the original report, I just wanted to do a bit of a screenshot. So we've made several changes, modifications to a report to fit our particular needs. And I do want to acknowledge here the help and expertise of Mark Engelman, who's here at Minnesota in my department, who helped create this report with me. Next slide. So the specific changes that we made is we did actually want to limit the report to just recent electronic editions. We have continued to move away from print reserves. And so it makes up a very small percentage of our reserve materials. Our report focuses on identifying the most recent electronic edition for previous print or electronic editions. Due to our licensing with databases, we also wanted to ensure that we were capturing resources that were available for the Twin Cities campus as opposed to other 4 campuses. So we added in group information. We also took out the academic department, but added in the course code, since that's how we identify our courses here. And we set the report to include not archived courses, since we do archive after 6 semesters or 2 academic years. So we have just started working with our course reserve staff on the use of this report. The initial run had 730 courses that had identified potential new additions. So the scalability of that, while we are actually starting the process for our fall lists, has affected the initial review. Some of the questions that have come up is whether instructors are specifically using an older edition or interested in knowing about the edition, and how do we bring those decision points into our current process. There's also consideration on how we would use the additional data sets we get from the bookstore project, ebooks and textbooks, and how do we share that information as well within their processes when they're working with instructors on their end. So we have covered a lot of information here, but we did want to open up the conversation for any questions. So if you have a question, please do add it into the chat. While you're doing that, I did want to just put in the chat, we have mentioned a couple, the join formulas that were used by the different institutions in how we modified that original report. And so we have created, a Google document where we have added in Minnesota and Bond's information on how we modified the report. So please do take a look at that if you're interested in seeing more of the specifics involved. So I'm going to stop there and just see if anybody has any questions. I'm not seeing any, which is totally awesome. I know there was a lot of information to go through. Jamin, I don't know if you want to add in anything.
Just thank everyone for attending. We hope that you will find this useful. Again, we'll be sharing the recording and the presentation deck later today or tomorrow. Just be looking for it on Leganto L. Please let us know if there's anything else we can assist with. Does anyone from Ex Libris want to say anything? I saw Jesse was here.
I'm here. I was just wondering if I should pop in. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. First of all, I have to say this is amazing. So really, thank you so much. As you were sharing that report, I know just enough about analytics to understand how incredibly complex this is. So it's really amazing to see this. And I also want to thank you guys for setting this up. And also, I know half your team is asleep right now, but for keeping it, conversational. It's really helpful for us to see these different use cases and to better understand how different libraries would use this. We are definitely talking about what the next step from here could be from our side. And is there something that we could do, in the product or with the report or something like that? So it's really helpful for us to see, that even just across the 4 of you, you've needed to customize it in different ways, or, you would use it in different ways. So it gets us in a better position to be able to think about what a possible solution could look like. So I really appreciate one, you doing this and setting up this session for everybody, and the way that you've presented it. So I don't have more to say than that, but we are certainly aware of the need across the community. And I think that this report has kind of opened us up to some new thinking about what could possibly be done inside the product. So, so thank you for that.
Well, again, thank you, everyone. Feel free to reach out to your Leganto working group. We're here for you to help you out as best as we can. And we look forward to seeing you down the road, maybe in Minnesota next year.
Great.
Have a
Thanks,
good day,
everybody.
everyone. Thanks, everyone.
You.
Bye.
Bye.